ridiculous. It would be kind of really just a terrible thing to come from that background and say anything's trivial.
It's impossible.
Well, I have to spend a lot of time thinking about stuff that I think is ridiculous.
It's impossible to derive F equals MA from like quantum mechanics.
Yes, that's actually fairly easy.
But if you're can you show it to me?
Sure.
Yes.
Where are you going to do it? You save us
Yeah,
time.
it's really easy.
Really? Can you show me?
Sure.
Why?
Just Google it, like, honestly.
Having someone explain something to you is often way better than Googling it.
That's not true.
Why? What is
As long as the person doing the
Just
explaining
find
is
the
fine.
eigenvalues of the Schrodinger equation and take the first derivative with respect to x. That's what you
Okay,
get.
yes,
That's
that's-
all you get.
That sounds reasonable in my grasp.
Somebody left a flash drive. They're gonna need that.
You need it when that happens to work.
Somebody leaves a flash drive.
Yeah, when you like are doing a project, you just leave it somewhere.
Oh, shoot, I just typed the wrong password.
Although they aren't cheap.
Oh,
There's one more cookie left.
did I?
Pretty good.
Actually, wait, you can have it. You can have it. You can keep going.
Oh, you, Mr. Josh.
He can have it. I can always.
What do you have against me?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
There's a second.
Oh, preparatory.
For some reason,
The idea that it's actually inside and not just sandwiched makes it so much better.
What?
it's
What's
completely.
both music?
It's pretty good.
Well, you don't put that second
Give it a something out of something.
So punk deals with punk deals.
Like 4 out of 5 in terms of what I expected.
I'm not allowed to
Absolutely.
give me a straight face, and I'm not bringing knowledge in either.
You are.
I'm not.
What I said.
Why are you showing me?
The subject of quantum mechanics, that's what Why Should I Believe talked about last night.
Yeah, that's what.
It was pretty. It was pretty awful.
I thought it would be that.
It was.
Yeah, my response to that is actually just ask a whole bunch of technical questions.
No, but like literally the whole thing was like
the person
quantum mechanics reveals the beauty of God, and I was like, okay, justify that. No, there is no justification.
Really?
It's just beauty.
Justify it with girl being hot. The beauty is totally relative, obviously.
No, I mean, there's symmetry.
No, but there's a difference in the sense that they're like, yeah, quantum mechanics is support for God.
Anyone who says that quantum mechanics is beautiful hasn't figured out psychic quantization.
Even if everybody generally accepts that that thing is beautiful, there's a someone has to draw the connection between this universe is beautiful and made by God, right? And usually it's designer, right? But you can counter that.
I mean, there's some neat tricks that look cool in old school quantum, but by the time you get to quantum field theory and psychic quantization and denormalization, it's a huge fucking mess.
Yeah. Yeah, but some people find beauty in chaos. So, I mean, that's beautiful. And that doesn't mean anything.
Well, you
I
were
guess
there,
they find
but
beauty
you
in
can use
everything.
your imagination
Right?
how bad you think it could have gone, and
So
it's
it's
just
just
about
everything.
that.
There's God. Like, it just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, well, if you find God in denormalization,
Check
you must be using God differently than everyone else in Western civilization.
Maybe that's not the evidence for God for them, more it's that they already know there's a God, so they say, oh, they see God there too. It's like, once you know it's there,
You
you start
backfill
seeing it everywhere.
You backfill the evidence.
No, it's like, I didn't know how far before, now I see it everywhere.
We
What's
also
happening?
talked about the mind a little bit, boss. Yeah, you can go.
Yeah.
I suppose it is your
Meeting will begin now. So, hope you all had a nice spring break. We have 2 announcements before we start the discussion, which is actually tremendously exciting to me. First off, as usual, Friday night, 7 p.m., Rocky Mountain, we are having dinner. Stop by to have wonderful conversation with wonderful people and mediocre food. Second is elections. Myself and both of them, we are all graduating in a month, leaving Santiago as the only member of this organization with any leadership experience, as an officer here at least. So we need at least 3 people to sign up to become officers. If we have more than 3, we'll have an election. Otherwise, we'll stand up here and declare that they're officers, like happened about a year and a half ago, actually.
When are the elections?
Elections will be in a month.
Wait, everyone has to get regardless.
Yes,
if you're running unopposed, you still have
Yes,
to-
everyone will
Yeah,
give a
I'm gonna
speech. And also, when you declare your
Business goal?
intention of
No.
running for an officer, you have to submit
Robotics. I didn't get into this.
a recommendation for theme music, because I will be having WWE-style entrance themes for all of you when you run for officer, so be prepared for that.
But they're giving me,
There's a third.
they're giving me tons of money.
What was the third announcement, Josh?
Why not?
There's a gaming
What?
stuff on Saturday at 1 p.m. I think it is. Or it won't be up in the student center. That's what I changed it. So game night, game day, gaming event this Saturday at 1 p.m. Be there or be square.
Do you know why that? What's the pun of that joke? Why is it be there, be square? Do you know why?
Because I don't like circles.
L7,
Make me
man.
uncomfortable.
Because if you're a circle, you're not a round, or if you're a square, you're not a
That
round.
is not.
I like it though.
Moving on for
It
a
works.
second before I
It
punch
works.
someone in the throat.
You don't fit in if you're.
Square is pejorative term.
Tonight we're talking about transhumanism, which if you've been in the group for a year or more, you probably remember I talked about this once, and you probably will recognize every slide in this presentation if you have a good memory, because it was good enough to where I didn't really think it would be changed. So I'm going to run through this quickly since it's already starting so late. Transhumanism encompasses all the attempts to improve the human condition fundamentally, whether it's improving the human body, improving the human mind, improving, I guess in some ways, the human environment, the way we interact with nature. And it's a very broad subject, but generally speaking, it's how do we improve ourselves, and it's the belief that we should try to improve ourselves. Official definitions: the intellectual culture movement that affirms the possibility and desirability of improving the human condition through applied reason, especially through science and technology. So I'm going to give actually a list of them. So, secondary definition, very similar: study of ramifications and premises and possible dangers, which is what we'll probably be focusing on today. So, I believe the next slide is, I'm not sure what the next slide was. Nope, moving straight through that. Well, I don't know if you want to hear a repeat of a story time from last year, but how many of you have heard me tell briefly the Epic of Gilgamesh? You have. That's the majority. So, don't want to run through the, I don't want to.
Who are those two guys?
Oh, I'll tell it for you then specifically. So, the oldest narrative that we have a cohesive record of is from around 4,000 years ago in ancient Sumeria. It tells the story of Gilgamesh, the fifth king of the city of Uruk, and his friend Enkidu. They're mighty warriors and mighty leaders, epic heroes. Gilgamesh himself wasn't fully mortal. He was 1/3 mortal and 2/3 divine. So Hercules was only half divine. Gilgamesh was more epic than him by far. And Enkidu was actually created especially to challenge Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh was bored. He had nothing to do with his life. So he took some of his boredom out on his people, partially through his insatiable sexual lust. People got tired of it, so they prayed for the gods to create him an equal, and he did. Though instead of killing him as the gods intended, they became the closest of friends and rampaged across the world, killing every evil thing they could find, cut down every cedar tree in the country of Lebanon, killed the bull of heaven, which was a metaphysical concept. They killed the metaphysical concept with the sword, by the way.
Whoa.
After all of this, the gods decided they made a mistake and decided to kill Enkidu, striking him down with a sickness, and he died with Gilgamesh weeping at his bedside. And as a result of this, Gilgamesh went on an epic quest to conquer his own mortality. He dove to the bottom of the deepest part of the deepest ocean to find a plant, a flower. The flower that, when consumed, would grant someone eternal life.
What spoiler you did? I forgot about you.
It's 4,000 years old.
Spoilers.
Game of Thrones, you can have spoilers.
Epic of Gilgamesh is a bit out of the Bible window. So he succeeds, he finds the plant that will give him eternal life. However, there's actually an interesting parallel with the book of Genesis. A serpent fucks it up. A snake comes upon him while he's sleeping and eats the flower from out of his hands. So now somewhere in the world slithering around is an immortal, unkillable serpent that screwed Gilgamesh out of eternal life. And the moral of the story is, as stated in the
Why
text,
didn't Gilgamesh just eat the flower right away?
he dove to the bottom of the ocean. He was prepared.
Yeah, what do you don't eat when you're tired. It's not
Or when you're underwater.
Yeah,
I'm
wait
sure
15 minutes.
an immortal wouldn't like mine. Like, what if he's gonna get sick after swimming? He's immortal.
Wait, yeah, if he eats it, then he shouldn't be tired anymore because he's immortal.
Yeah, it was an oversight on his part.
Yes, but also suggests there's some infinite input of energy that's keeping you alive.
6 millennium.
Yeah, if you can get tired,
If you wait.
if you can get tired, you can get exhausted.
Yeah.
And if you can get exhausted, you can like die. muscles.
It does have flaws.
It's not as good as your
But I would disagree. But in any case, the moral of the story is that we should not try to conquer death. We should not try to conquer our own limitations. We should simply accept what we are and live and die as human beings and simply accomplish what we can with our life. This is the exact opposite of the transhumanist belief, which is that it's something we should continually pursue. So goals of transhumanism: eliminate poverty, eliminate disease, eliminate all disability, eliminate malnutrition, eliminate mortality, conquering death itself.
You should add like a eliminate.
I should have added the
Right, this is right here. It's like goals.
goal. So, a lot of things we can now do. Gilgamesh had to dive to the bottom of the sea to find a plant. We have more practical scientific solutions. We can diagnose diseases in people before they're born through genetic diagnosis. We can diagnose even before they're fertilized. We can tell what the sperm and the egg of the mother and the father will be and the chances of producing a genetically deformed or deficient child. We have performance-enhancing drugs, steroids and such, ways to, other than genetics, to improve your physical capabilities, sedatives, painkillers. If you lose a limb, we are coming ever closer to achieving the Star Wars dream of having Luke Skywalker's indistinguishable from a normal human robotic hand.
But you have to wear a black clothes.
Yes, you have to. There's all kinds of advances in this. One of the most interesting ones actually was read about this a year ago, so it's probably advanced even further. Osseointegration. They can now take certain materials and just straight up fuse them to the stump of a bone so that it's actually attached to you instead of just wrapped around it and secured. It's a much more stable platform for doing things like this. So this includes soldiers or people who lose their arms in accidents, eventually people who didn't have limbs to begin with. Genetic engineering, we talked about a little bit during these things during the eugenics talk. We've had genetic engineering technologies. We can apply them to crops and livestock. GMOs are a big topic. We should probably talk about that at some point. But the controversies around that are sort of pale in comparison to some of the things that sort of like transhumanism. We can replace organs, growing them with stem cells, itself a contentious topic for some people. And lastly, you have things like neural implants. You can attach certain electronics to the human brain. There's actually a chip that you can put in a human brain. They've done studies where you can do it and have a human control a robotic arm just by thinking at it. The chip attached to their head. So telekinetic controlled machines. You could connect information networks. Imagine like a cell phone embedded in a single chip in the retina of your eye. That's the kind of end goal of transhumanism. So nanomedicine, replacing living cells and the things they do with artificial cells and the things that they do, repairing damage at cellular level like Wolverine. Arguments against it, it's impossible. I would argue that it's not because we're advancing further every day. It's hubris. We will end up destroying ourselves because this, much like Gilgamesh, this is not a goal we should strive towards. It's dangerous. We will create something that will obliterate the entire human species. It's unfair. You have Bill Gates, who gets every cybernetic upgrade in the world and conquers the planet as it's the god emperor of mankind, who is unable to be shaken from his throne because he's already exponentially more powerful than everyone else, and no one will ever be able to catch up. And it's dehumanizing. You're not a human being unless you're flesh and blood. You'll notice I'm sort of cynical. I disagree with all of these. Feel free to tell me if you do agree with it. And lastly, it's eugenics, Nazism. You're improving certain people to the detriment of others. That is a terrible thing. So, those are the problems. This is actually sort of old news. Google's investing a large amount of money in a company called Calico, which is dedicated to, among other things, eliminating death.
What they did, quick note on this, they actually took a really good strategy on this. So like a disproportionate amount of money is spent on cancer research, and if you said cancer just disappears, that increases the human lifespan by 3 years on average. And they're trying to tackle the other issues like heart disease that actually kill more people and actually increase longevity, and they're trying to take a more pragmatic approach rather than a more sympathetic approach.
And the discussion now.
I have one quick question on this.
Yes. Old school discussion.
I have to go back. It was some parents' fault.
Which those?
Were those hikers using any time?
I think so, yes.
That's sad.
It's a lot of
Those things
time.
are really
Jason?
Guinea fowl.
Guinea fowl? But
It's a kind of bird.
Those tigers were they were trans-tigerized.
It's actually the wild version of chickens.
Do you,
No. They're cuter than chickens. That's a logo.
kiwi birds are cuter than chickens.
Lots of birds are cuter than chickens.
First of all,
So everyone.
Okay, so my first question is, I forget what it's called, but when I hear discussions about I mean, I'm all for cybernetic enhancements, human enhancements, that stuff, that's all fine. But when I hear transhumanists talk about eliminating death, it seems
Cryonics.
What?
Cryonics?
No. What's it called? There's some limit to the number of times a cell can divide before it messes up.
right.
I forget what that limit's called.
Telomere.
Yeah.
It's telomere, there's a limit down to
exactly.
Telomere.
And there's a limit to how many times the cell can divide. I forget what that limit's called, but transhumanists seem to really talk about how to defeat that limit. And it seems like they don't really understand genetics. Because that limit is there so that cells commit suicide when they have, it's like a failed, or it's a timed failure for like cars. Like cars will fail, will have one component fail after a certain amount of time so that you rebuild the engine. Because, right, and that's basically the same thing with cells, where they have, the telomere is a timer to kill this cell after a certain number of divisions because the genetics will be too messed up. And so I think that I'd like to see transhumanists be more informed. I mean, I'm not a genetics biologist, but I'd like to see, from what I know of genetic biology, it seems like most of the discussions from transhumanists seem to be rather uninformed as to how biology works.
As with any subject, most people are uninformed.
Yes, that's true.
But is that really sorry, clarification, but is that really an attack on transhumanism, or is it just, that doesn't really tackle the heart of the problem with their shooting?
Okay. Let me rephrase that. I mean, saying you want to eliminate cancer is a thing. Saying you want to eliminate heart disease is a thing. Saying you want to eliminate death doesn't make any sense. It's like, death is the absence of death is your body stopped working. And there's a million ways for that to happen.
But that doesn't mean it can't be, it doesn't have to be a pragmatic goal in the short-term future.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a long-term goal. It just seems like a weird thing to say. People, no matter what we do, people will die unless it's a complete replacement of human with non-genetic components.
but
Well, if it was, so, does that matter?
I'd say, that's not a real argument, because in the same way when you say, let's eliminate cancer, you're not a cancer researcher, you might not know the details of how it's going to be achieved, but there's people striving towards achieving it. Same with conquering death. So what if telomeres isn't an easy solution? Well, replacing all your cells in your body with nanobots that never stop working, that's a possible solution in 100 years, right? So it's more of whether we should endeavor to do these things, and not how specifically are we going to do it.
You have to consider the consequences of, at the very least, people living twice or 3 times longer than they normally do, at the very minimum. Because then we have a population explosion, or else people have to stop having sex.
You have to be able to afford it, though. That's the fixing factor,
Yeah,
right?
Right now.
Do you really want 100 years of being a geriatric?
Maybe is better than being
We're just assuming a lot of things. In transhumanism, on a long enough timeline, you said you have to be able to afford it right now. You don't have to be able to afford it for the future. The way these conversations have done, in my experience, is we just talk about a long enough timeline. Basically, everything is everything, and you just do whatever you want. There's no resources and so on. So basically, the argument is should we be moving towards a society where you don't have to die and can be it's the issues that you brought up, not necessarily the smaller issues that have come up in that day-to-day situation. Because it's a long enough timeline. It's not just tomorrow.
I mean, the most common objections I hear, I don't actually give them much credibility, but is that it's a form of, it basically reinforces classes. Essentially that, one, the poor people will not be able to afford to live forever, and they will always be behind the rich people who are living forever. Or if you don't even want to take it to the live forever extreme, you could think about it, say the rich people can get like foot implants or whatever implants in their minds that make them stronger, smarter. Just insert adjective here, such that a poor person will never be able to get the money to ever reach their potential and will be actually strictly inferior to them just based on socioeconomic status. That's one of the most common objections I hear. I mean, you can argue about the little details about how would this work in the big picture, but I think those are the bigger objections to this sort of thing.
Big suggestion I personally have is that if you eliminate death, then you're going to have a bunch of old people that are just going to sort of sit there
What if you eliminate aging?
at the top of it.
Yeah.
That's even worse,
Why is that worse?
because then people are just going to be continuously gaining more and more experience and more, not even necessarily wealth, but more power.
That's it.
It's not good.
Also, I mean, to add to what Brian says, we're doing a pretty good job oppressing poor people right now without transhumanism itself.
Well, the problem is you would create a younger generation of people who have absolutely no hope of moving up in the world.
Yeah.
Because everyone
Well-
above them will have more experience.
That's not true. All the rich kids will.
Why would they just?
We get the rich kid treatment.
You are so such a rich man. But yeah. But why are you assuming they would work forever? Why are you even assuming there would be work? Because as we have proven in the past, as we go forward, and we have infinite resources, because that's apparently a thing that is reasonable to assume.
Say abundant.
A shit ton of resources.
Whatever.
Well, this is assuming that we conquer the
We'll
resources.
never violate.
disassemble Jupiter.
We'll never violate the second law of
Okay, I mean, like, if we're
no matter
assuming-
what you say.
If we're assuming transhumanism, we're also assuming a lot of things that happen. Like, if we're assuming like really good transhumanism, we're assuming lots of this things have already happened.
But yeah, that's a good point. And the other how I like to draw on it is like people say, what about food? Well, who says we're at that point? Why would we even be in the human body essentially? Because your genetics are just going to break down. Eventually, you might even transition to where we're mostly robotic and essentially you just have your brain mapped out as a computer and that sort of thing. Where you don't. The only thing that really you have to worry about is power, in terms of electrical power.
Yeah, robots are a lot more efficient than humans.
I'd like to talk to critical point about the eugenics wars from Star Trek.
Ooh.
Because that would be an argument against transhumanism, because as you all know, Khan and his fellow transhumans took over like a shit ton of the world. And they fought a bunch of wars and many people died.
As you all know.
This is Georgia Tech, we all know this.
Other than that,
I believe that war happened in 1996, so we're okay.
Isn't that inevitable though, even without transhumanism? Isn't that what's already happening? Is essentially like corporations are taking over. Like,
Yeah, I'm much more worried about Skynet than I am about genetics.
I'm getting to that. I'm going to build it eventually and take over the world.
okay. So the argument is.
I guess, like, in a nutshell, like, if all the rich people, like Bill Gates and Larry Page, were like, oh, we want to become like superhumans, what's to stop them from manipulating the American government and their media politicians?
I don't understand how that's different than what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Why is that like?
when you
why is
see
it,
all those characters, is they get so much money and they're like,
Bill
well, I
Gates-
don't have anything to do with it, so I'm going to give it away because they're like, there's nothing more that they can gain. Like they gain everything they have to gain.
Bill Gates
I
says
mean, they
it's-
have the economic power, but they don't got the political power.
They do what?
Once
What?
they have superpower,
have you also
what?
Bill Gates' power isn't limited by his physical strength. Let's start there.
Yeah. He's doing, I mean,
If he was
whatever
smart,
he
he wouldn't
wants,
have.
it's not, the problem isn't that he doesn't have robotic implants.
Yeah, money is politics, so I don't understand that. Like the rich people directly influence politics. Like the Koch brothers, like
Yeah, The rich people are doing just fine influencing politics without cybernetic implants. That's not going to help them any.
The technocrat, like the startup founders, like
What? I don't. So if they were robots, it would be better.
Technology.
I don't know, I could imagine them trying to like, I guess, impose their will. Like if Bill Gates was much smarter.
But
Or like Elon Musk.
there are people who are smarter. Smart people are smart.
That's what I want to know.
Being smart.
If Bill Gates were much smarter, what?
No, it's too.
Finish the
It's
sentence.
too drastic to say.
I'm not following what the doomsday scenario.
The world might be infinitely better.
Yeah, I mean, and also,
Basically, a group of technocratic elites who are very smart, much smarter than anybody else, manipulates the political systems of the world.
How?
They're
That
smart.
already happens, though, is the thing.
Yeah.
That's why I don't understand.
the problem with that
have
is that idiots are the
elite
ones
system and a elite
It's
system.
manipulated.
They're arguing with just one person sticking the ball.
If only the Koch brothers were Bill Gates.
If people who understood economics were manipulating the political system, we'd be in a much better situation.
Maybe.
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe.
So, new topic, maybe. What do you
Yeah,
guys
perhaps
think?
not the best luck.
Like, oh,
I was just thinking, what if someone comes in
it
just...
did, it's now.
Yeah, change it.
Why?
It's always a small thing.
It's
So what do you guys think of the idea that if, assuming people become immortal, that you'll not have any ability to basically see large social changes with people dying out?
I reject that.
So,
what I was-
So
I'm not
born
sure
into
that I
the
actually think that, I'm not taking up the position that that would, being immortal would stop that, but I was just thinking that's one thing that people often bring up is like, oh, just wait for the people, the older people who have backwards to die off and then it'll be better. And it's
I
like,
disagree with that.
what about when old people never die?
This is a mistake. I mean, if they really want people, they don't have motivations to leave here and go somewhere else, so it'd be as good as if they die.
Is the argument really that we're gonna, instead of fixing the problem, we're gonna wait for the problem to die? Is that really, is that
That has
really the
been the
objection?
model up until now.
That's
so-
what's happening with gay marriage.
I mean,
You
but
just
that's
have-
not a good
You
model.
just have more progressive old people. Like if you had old people who were like I feel like if you were lived forever and you just understood things change and you were just used to change your opinion over time, you just would change your opinion more.
Or
over
you
time.
could just like go to the bigoted country over there, or not country, planet over there, and you could just like have a blast with all your socially behind friends. Like,
Yeah, well, that's just one thing I've noticed just from like sampling, like, what's, I forget what the word is in statistics, but basically the sampling across, what is it, cross-sectional? Yeah. Okay, the cross-sectional sampling is that there isn't a particularly large correlation between age and how forward-thinking you are.
Okay, so even if it was based on when you were born, whatever you were born with, like those are the ideas you keep forever. Well, then if an idea becomes wrong, then everyone who's born after that will just have that idea forever. And then, so eventually there will be more people born after this point in time in the world than not. But I also just feel like that's just not necessarily
I mean, so I feel like people can get more conservative with age. Like Fred Phelps was a civil rights lawyer.
I would
okay, that first statement, minus the example, is actually true. People do get more conservative with age. As you start making more money and you start getting taxed more people.
I feel like we have to make every single observation we make about age no longer holds water when people can live forever. Because like, has anyone met someone who's 200 years old? They probably are really different.
I've read
Or
about
weird. You don't know how they're gonna act. So like, you can't make any of these assumptions. Like, we're basically babies if we're gonna live for 1,000 years. When you're like 100, you're just like a child.
Right.
Like,
Also,
super
the thing
naive.
is, if you're getting to this point, are you really conservative anymore? Like, if resources aren't really a problem and life isn't isn't short, essentially. Maybe it's not infinite because you still have to heat up the universe. But once you've resolved all these scarcity problems, why would people still be conservative? At least in the financial sense, like it kind of like takes away some of these problems, and also that
talking about the social type of thing.
again. But for this to be viable, if we're going to get to this point of conquering death, we're also going to get to the point of where we can go to other planets. So if you don't like the community you're in, you can just go to another community, essentially.
Well, you don't have to go to another planet to go to a different community.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, as the population expands, like, and that sort of thing, like there are ways around this. Like you don't, if you live forever and you're like the nearest planet I like that is consistent with my views is 157 light years away. Well, then it's not a big deal because you'll get there eventually. You can take a nap for that long for all anyone cares.
I think we're getting sidetracked into post-scarcity economics, which while is a really interesting topic, isn't this meeting's topic. So how about we talk about designer papers, which is possible reality very, very soon. It is something that like we can already do to a certain point, see if before babies even conceive whether it has higher chances of being healthy or not. And eventually we'll be able to like choose its eye color, hair color, height even maybe. So should this be done when we can?
Definitely to eliminate genetic diseases.
Yeah, but what about aesthetic?
Yeah, it depends. What if like we modify the baby, but it comes out and then there was an unforeseen genetic defect introduced?
And don't do it.
Right, obviously if it has an element of
we
risk.
understand that much about the human genome, but we understand having different genes.
I think the point is, if we could do this, what are the ramifications, rather than saying, if we could do this, what are the theoretical limitations of the actual procedure?
What are the theoretical side effects?
I think it's a more interesting question that should we attempt to do this, assuming that it is successful?
Should we modify all babies so that they have attached earlobes instead of detached earlobes?
No.
For
Attached
aesthetic
earlobes
reasons.
are superior.
So you said that get rid of the defects and stuff like that. That's an easy agreement. Like let's try to do that.
Do you really want to bring new people into the world with sickle cell anemia?
Right. So yeah. So I mean, like things that are demonstrably affect quality of life. Definitely go for those. Then we get into a gray area where it's like, okay, will racism become a thing, like a much bigger problem? Or will sexism become a problem? Like, will all these things become more of a problem when you can actually control who and what types of people are born? And I feel like that isn't. I don't think that's an argument against bringing new technology to the world, but it is a concern, and one would hope that we solve those problems before this becomes a thing. If it doesn't, then I don't know.
Rather than
Could
having
society-
girls and trying to get rid of them, the Chinese people could just specifically make men.
I don't think that's it. But I mean, or if you had a couple where the couple had a 50% chance of having a blonde-haired baby or 50% of the brunette, could they select for the blonde embryos?
And if we're manipulating genetics, you might as well make
That's not
their
manipulating
hair
genetics.
like
That's just taking 4 eggs and
In
picking
terms of what Ross was talking about, that's an interesting question. In terms of like, would it aggravate race issues or that kind of thing? I'm not totally sure. I kind of think that if we were at that point, it wouldn't necessarily. I don't think it really would necessarily aggravate like race relations. But although while we're on the point, I just wanted I was just curious and as far I don't know if I'm thinking around the right thoughts when it comes to this, but all right. Well, a lot of the argument that people have in terms of society right now is whether or not being gay is a choice or not. I generally think it's not, but a lot of people think it is, people think it isn't. So if it were not a choice, and then we got to this point, and would we just see no more gay people? And if we didn't, would people look down upon gay people for not choosing to be
discriminate?
No, huh?
You mean the parents would, if there was a gay gene, would parents opt not to have gay children?
Yes.
I mean, isn't there almost an incentive there not to have gay children because you don't want them to have to do it?
Yeah, I mean, like, and you're also straight, so it makes sense for you to probably choose if you have the choice on a yes or no.
What, then again, gay prejudice is declining. So by the
I
time
understand
you-
that, but I'm saying
like,
like,
But if you have it's difference between having, like, right, there are people that, like, support gay marriage, but if you had the choice, like, do you want a gay baby or a straight baby, they would still say straight baby, essentially.
Yeah.
Even though they're not opposed to gay rights in any capacity.
yeah. I mean, there's different problems. There's, I don't want my child to be suffering from the stigma in the world, and then there's the things about like, oh, okay, we have to do artificial insemination. Oh, like that, like there's two kinds of problems. This one, I don't think, you know, like temporarily that's something we have to avoid. The small problems about reproduction and such, I don't see how that's a huge deal.
So another thing, I think if we get to this point, like, height and, like, eye color and hair color will mean less and less and less and less because it essentially becomes like a
Is it
choosable.
still special?
No, like, it'll become a choosable trait, right? Essentially, so.
But then
like,
we'll have a bunch of really tall people because people want their kids to be athletes.
Yeah, here's something to think about. Not necessarily an issue, but we might have like generational fashions in which everyone in a certain like this generation, they all look like Valerian, purple-eyed, blonde hair, and then that went out of fashion, and then you see the next generation, they all look the same as well.
Well,
That's
we
really
already choose names, and those go through trends.
That's true.
But
names are
Correlated with what characters are popular.
have you seen that map? Jennifer had a dominant streak.
Do people feel that, as far as this goes, would you think most people would choose for their family to look like them, like their son to be of the same race or whatever? Like, because, I mean, I think they generally would.
Why would they not be unless they were?
Two things. I think they generally would, because it, like, you know, your family would kind of, this goes, people feel like you should all look the same and stuff. But at the same time, depending on who you are, I think a lot of people feel like it might just be easier not to. Like, for instance, my dad, when he came to America, he like dealt with a lot of racism and stuff, and he like felt that if he was white, he wouldn't have had to deal with that stuff. He had like 5 different degrees and did like a lot of studying and stuff, and he's just easier. So like, if he chose for me to be white, it would make sense, and like you wouldn't have to deal with racism, which would make it easy.
In that sense, I mean, people might use this as a way to sort of make your child a straight white baby boy, overcome gay issues, racism, and gender issues.
How are you
But
gonna
if we had the ability to just modify this thing called our children,
How are you gonna be able to get them to
wouldn't
college?
that lead to
Already are.
racism? Because like then the boundaries between races would disappear because a white man can make his child look like an Asian person or a black person.
Well, if you're talking about that in today's society, then you would just logically everyone would have their children be white males.
Not necessarily males, but probably white.
Yeah.
Because there are things that go along with being a female, and they don't necessarily have to, but do. Like some women want to have, like there are no women, it's kind of weird, but there's some women do want to have, like, or guys do too, who want to have daughters. It's just a different experience for certain people. Certain people do feel that it gives a different experience. So like, I would definitely think that you definitely want, like, I don't think being a different race is a different experience raising one person to another. Doesn't necessarily have to be. But raising a child, a daughter from a child, raising a daughter or a son is just different.
Going back to what you said, whereas people would want to keep their family looking like themselves, and so that would kind of enhance diversity. I could also see the opposite thing being true, where let's say if you were like below height, like a male, and you're 5'3", and maybe your wife's like 5 foot. Well, maybe you don't want your kid to be 5'10", because that would be a little like the difference would be ridiculous. But let's say you want your kid to be 5'4.5", or like so you're essentially converging on what the averages are and what most people are like. You could do stuff like that. So I think that after a couple of generations, you could still potentially run into the diversity issues. As people are like, well, we want this trait, but we can't go from point A to point B instantaneously. And so after a couple of generations, you slowly get there.
Would it actually be an awful thing if everyone was the same height?
If we do all these traits that are so similar, you have these people who are so alike, such little diversity, would that begin to have genetic issues as far as, well, I guess no, because if we're genetically modifying them,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be an issue. But would we want diversity? I mean, I don't.
At a certain point, yeah.
Animals
I
that
think it's
can't
just-
manipulate genetically.
I think all of this depends on how strong the parent's sense of identity is. If they have like a really strong sense of identity, then they would probably more likely want their children to have the same, or a similar identity as them. So like if you have, like your race identity is really important to you, you'd be more likely to have a kid that is, shares that.
That is true, but I also say, and like early on, that would definitely be frowned upon to change the race of your child to a different race, so it's easier. Just look, people look down upon you. But that's I'm saying that's what would happen. It would.
Wouldn't racism dissolve though? I would think more quickly if it were entirely a choice.
It would be a choice.
Well, yes and no. Well, first off,
Not instantaneously.
like it would be a choice for the rich versus not rich. So then anyone who isn't would just be poor. I think necessarily, or then and then they're like if inside the community, if you change the race of your child, they'd be like, all right, so I guess you don't really identify with us. You want your kid to be like this. So like that's how I feel like it would be initially. But I also feel like in that society, we would just put a much smaller emphasis on looks in general.
Yeah.
Because everyone would look somewhat aesthetically pleasing, and they would just like, just like whatever.
Yeah, I think we'd be much
It's more about who
likely to
you
get rid
are,
of
so
ugly people than get rid of a specific race.
Yeah, so it would be more about who you are. So how you identify yourself would be more about your thoughts.
But even
Random interlude.
Or style.
I'm sitting here imagining like this stupidity of the internet getting a hold of like gene templates. So you have like this online like post your genetic template, and then a whole bunch of people will be like, oh, that looks cool. I'll just like copy it and just like make a copy of this, and then suddenly you have like a whole bunch of people that look the same.
So looking forward,
your parents made you from like whatever website.
Well, really?
looking forward, we might like start making like our own races. Like elven people will start being.
It's actually kind of cool in like a sci-fi fantasy way, but.
okay, still going back to your thing, where you're talking about in communities where how it becomes a town, but you still have the conversion effect, right? Like you don't have to jump from point A to point B instantaneously. Like you could have like a generation where you have like, I don't know how to quantize this, but like 20% lighter skin. So gradually over generations you get from point A to point B, but it's not an immediate change. You kind of deflect the whole frowned upon thing.
Well, you definitely could do that, but I'm just saying you could also not do that.
I think my hope is in that the society that like aesthetics become more or less meaningless because that would be my hope, is that like race and all of those other attributes like height and that sort of things just start meaning significantly less, because that actually would just be a benefit of today's society too.
Also, sports would be sick because everyone's like the same-ish. So like a truly good athlete would just be like crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe these are the last words. It's about 7:35.
An extra minute, you can like, you're right.
That's true. Who wants to just continue this format, and who wants to go into anarchy? Anarchy. Raise your hands for anarchy high so I can actually talk.
No, I was used to
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's tied.
No, I was saying. You have things, yeah.
Okay. Anarchy then. Well,
I feel like we would have a less judgmental society because if you can like program like if you can choose the genetic makeup of your child, and that same child could potentially alter your genetic makeup later on.
Yeah, but I feel like over a time, I feel like people might end up converging on what is this ideal or what is it called? You're not in the minority, majority.
Yeah, I don't think that would actually, I mean, it wouldn't be stagnant for a long time. It'd be like art, right? Something's really cool for X amount of time and then something else is cool.
It would also just be like how we view hot girls right now. Like hot girls in the 80s, hot girls in the 70s, hot girls in the 90s, hot girls in the
They had certain things in common, okay?
And then you get old and then it doesn't matter because you
Also, who you find attractive is also genetics. So we could modify genetics so that we find almost everyone attractive. So like it's not aesthetics.
That would make everything a lot easier.
Hey, I just want to toss out that don't forget there's that CNN special that's happening tonight. It's about atheism.
Is that the one that has
Is there like an offline community?
I don't know. I think it's total. Like it might have been in the same spirit of like they want to do something about atheism, but it doesn't look like it. Well, I think they didn't kind of get the stories or the topics they wanted out of the people over here, so they talked to some people elsewhere, and that's how it happened. I tried to get on with them, but it didn't. They didn't get back. Oh, but yeah, I think it's at like 8:30 or 9 or something.
I thought it was 9. I just read what you sent.
Is this on the television?
Yeah, this is on CNN on 9. I just think it's kind of it's interesting because it's CNN on prime time saying, hey, we're going to talk about non-believers, and I think they're going to show a spectrum of like here's the firebrands and here's like everybody else.
CNN.
Why do atheists hate America?
They all eat baby.
Find out. Next
Something we didn't touch on is with the technological singularity like coming on, we do want exponentially smarter humans because that way we won't be overshadowed by like computer over.
So when you train those,
Well, I for one don't mind
Well, up to the point until they can program better.
If computers are infinitely smart, what do they gain by having those, right? If they're already smarter than us, they can design something smarter than humans.
just in case they mess
Why do we give computers desires?
believed to be.
Well, there's a point, I think, where they'll improve, even if we didn't originally design them with emotions and desires, their self-improvements will lead to a level of complexity that necessarily has them.
I don't know if it has to.
They're going to be different emotions and desires than what we have.
We're not giving them emotions.
Yeah, no,
We should give them
That's like
emotions.
computer.
If they have empathy, they're less likely to like be Skynet.
Consider
I don't think
humans
it's
as
also
a biological machine.
I put it directly into the program. Like, when you think about being Skynet, but
Yeah, but then what's to say that after a million like generations of self-improvement, they don't override?
just make sure that's the most important thing. Like step 1, don't be Skynet. I feel like we can do that.
Well,
I feel like if you make a machine,
How to define not Skynet
Well,
as.
I would make a machine that skips the first step and say, fuck you.
just make a machine that's first, like, that can never harm humans.
Creating
Like,
when talking about the singularity, like it's easy to say create a machine that doesn't do this, but when talking about the singularity, the important thing is create a machine that doesn't want to become a machine that wants to do this. So I think empathy would be a strong tool.
I guess so, but like then you don't show empathy towards the end. Then it's like,
But we would if it's as smart as us. If it's as smart as us, like it should have human rights. I think.
no, they're just supposed to.
Pets
do
aren't
stuff
as
for
smart
us.
as us.
Well, that's what I'm saying, there's a relationship with wrong.
Like they're doing way more work. So if we had empathy for them, we'd have to treat them much better than we treat people. Why would we treat them as well as we treat people? That's the whole point of machines. They will do so much work for nothing.
I mean, if you design a machine who gains pleasure from doing work for us, then by all means. But if you design,
It doesn't have pleasure or not pleasure. It just does it. Just like you just do work.
Yeah, I know, that was just
Right. You have this chemical that makes you think you're getting pleasure, but you're not getting any.
no, well, that's how we define
You're
pleasure.
just
So you
doing
can't
it.
say I'm not getting pleasure with like dopamine and shit. That's what we define as pleasure.
Yeah, exactly. But
What if it just doesn't?
What if you define pleasure as running clock cycles out of a crystal?
But why? I mean, like it's a very, very complex machine. It's a million times smarter than humans.
It fucking loves clocking at 64 gigahertz. Boom.
Make it a variable. Call it pleasure. Every time the clock runs.
There is no in terms of function, there is no difference between silicon parts and our neurons. Our if you can think the same way with logic gates in the brain, logic gates.
Well, except ours are just so much.
Yeah, ours is we haven't gotten
right now.
The thing is sort of undergoes complex series of chemical reactions resolved.
But it's
the same method of processing information, except different methods, but the same result. The whole purpose of our neurons' complex chemistry is the transmission of electrical pulses. The same way I've always wondered compared to silicon. So the fact, we're not at the level of creating emotions on these simple machines yet, but we will be pretty soon.
I know it's fast. Because silicon's honestly, it's on its way.
Right, okay, sure, whatever it is. I don't know, quantum, whatever.
We started using biologically based potentially,
you do realize our biological components are slower than silicon components, with just much more components. Our computers process at nearly the speed of light, whereas our computers are slowed down by the
quantum kind of sad.
really excited when we talk about all the science, the way to almost never
well, I feel we should be able to do it.
I know we can, that I feel all these assumptions around.
Well, you wouldn't move that. You would actually just you would teleport.
Wouldn't that be dying?
Oh my god, we've gone over this.
But your soul.
Yeah, no, I would not allow them to beam me anyway. That
to me is
I think
somebody's trying to scare me.
I'm not going to urge people to
Did I miss anything? Interesting?
yeah,
designer based.
we're doing design.
I don't want babies at all.
Designers
But I would.
Those are just
Yeah, they literally come out of the
they're separating people better.
So
wait, hold on. I'm just curious. Are you for quantum design? Yes.
Yeah.
Compared to in the past,
Could you
I think we should just stop having that many babies. Period. No, not every. Parenthood is recalling, so you should have kids only if you really want to have kids, not because society says so.
whenever I
Well, we all gotta have at least.
Take a test on it.
Well,
No, the population needs to decrease dramatically.
lots of people are having lots of babies. So
yes, you normalize it across race, but then you also have to normalize across
even if what you want is to
There's no way
which is true, we should probably think about going downward. Only mirror.
Yeah, but there's population momentum, and even though the birth rate is decreasing, population for us is going to increase. It's like,
The overall force you are exposed.
I know, but we might run out of resources. Like,
Problems.
Gotta get from where? When Kennedy was president, the population was like 4 million. You do? Now,
really, you have to
What was it? There's more people.
Why are you way up the
Wasn't Katniss
Yeah, but then there were rich kids who were there too.
But
Well,
you
they
want to know that.
Yeah, but they have to want to.
But Candace know that work is a challenge. So
Depending on
Oh,
what you're
yeah.
arguing against, like, there's
clearly
it's true.
Yeah, but this kid's trained to kill people.
Yeah,
I feel like that's better.
Yeah, I'd rather live in
Something
my
not
body.
even here doesn't mean that they get sudden drop. But I do believe there's a strong correlation between mourners or
You're gonna tell the kid that was born has no training. Well, you watch
I kid one.
You watch the
The poor kid doesn't have to lie.
In
principle.
I feel like they are correlated with causing.
I was in spring break.
Alleviating.
It was boring.
I was literally super happy.
I went to California.
I went to Colorado.
I worked.
All I do is, it's all the same.
Sweet.
What are you supposed to do?
Wait, I have a question for you. Since we were talking about like transhumanism and immortality,
You are asking.
you're religious, right? So given the choice,
Well, I mean, there are.
given the choice,
The more you know.
would you
Not a lot.
like take the immortality?
I don't know if I would personally want to.
What do you find?
Well, it's a choice. You can choose to live as long as you want, but you will eventually have to commit like social
Sucker, you're gonna die in the
I don't think suicide is allowed to.
Okay, sure. You could be more and more reckless until you die in an accident.
Someone has to remind you.
But that is a form of suicide.
I mean, like, things happen, people could just die.
Well, it's like saying this,
Really
right?
upset
Like,
about
let's
that
say you
whole
have a
test.
really nasty
Like,
car.
we already held up
You
Facebook
could get, you
about
could take a
it.
treatment course and you could live longer. Cars are
I'm hesitant to say anybody would
I don't want to live longer.
really
So although there is this technique that extends your life,
You know what I read?
Don't
about
choose
that?
it
I read
because of a
professional
cause.
philosophy said that
I'm not one of those
he's brilliant.
who's like, well,
Actually,
I'm
not
gonna
even
tell
like,
you
you know, I
that
think
God doesn't like
It's
the
like
same.
he's
It's the same.
just his public persona.
Alright, but there's a difference between like living a regular human lifespan and potentially living thousands of years.
Well, no, the fact that he's not living like he's not doing much about it.
Okay.
I feel like he's gonna be which is my issue with it. I'd say
you just basically, I know those are weird.
I think my problem is I don't actually have an understanding of how politics are designed.
I would say eating.
Like, clearly it has some really big effects, right? Like, I still can't imagine, like, being.
But instead of the parents are like, you know, I used to be like, what do I want? I want a kid.
That's what I'm saying.
They do the opposite.
Then the kids who have them with those kids down your parents are fucked up, man. That's what they would say. And everyone like would make fun of you. It'd be like super bad.
That would literally be the worst.
It would be bad. It would be bad in two ways. Because like, you would either be super poor because first off, like when it's this point, the government can just step in and then just like
go into like this.
no more Down syndrome.
All the politicians I like.
You can't have a Down syndrome baby, and if you have a kid outside of the hospital and if he has Down syndrome, you're fucked up.
You might not be very much you don't know that. For a case like
You can go to black market.
Why would that exist? Yeah, well, if that happens, then those parents go to jail. When you're in jail and sees that it's your child, instant.
I like can't even new jobs.
So there would be a healthy black market.
I'm just saying, it's what happened.
Underground power, underground.
Where they specifically want to live.
At some point, I feel like
And then you homeschool
you would appoint
and
Physics, I mean, that's a pretty specialized thing. There are.
You're just talking about black market.
But besides that, I mean, as far as I can tell,
They already exist.
Because it's not on you, you're just supporting someone wise, and they're like, yeah, he's like, whoa.
I know a lot of
Listen, it's just a place like it.
Yeah, but he doesn't just admit that he doesn't know what's going on. He actually thinks he does.
Who are you talking about?
Well, so he actually says he thinks he knows there's a.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. All we have is what he says, because he's been there like, what, 3 months? I don't know, a year.
I know, he's like been in the Senate for like 2 years.
Which I know isn't valid.
Ooh.
Valid complaint.
Well, it is a valid complaint.
I mean, everyone complains about that he didn't have experience.
Wait,
And now,
Yes.
Well, you don't have to worry about Jeb Bush anymore, so. I got to
People stop.
American citizens.
Dynasty.
No, stop.
I just don't worry about Jeb Bush anymore.
I'm very much so. And it's not new.
No, at a 1% lower average.
I mean, I know that Roosevelt.
still.
Well, I'm not an American citizen, so I mean, it might affect me, but there's nothing I can do about it.
You can register to vote.
No,
Like, if they could say
Bro,
Hey, Sandy, if you want to vote in the same capacity I do, you can write your vote down, and I'll get a lighter out and I'll burn your vote next time.
all right.
voting is like it's an important symbol, but like talking about the person you like, you know,
It's
more
more
like that.
important.
That is so much more important than
That makes sense.
walking up and doing a little check box. It's really. But I mean, I think if you can vote, you should totally vote because you know for the millennium we don't get to do that. So still,
We should make
Yeah, I mean, I do vote, but I do recognize the fact that it's not doing.
It's not depressing though. I know, like.